Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. The Alpha's Arcane Bride. Episode 13. Chapter 92. Dulsanra, do not listen to her. Luna Maria shouted. She was the only one in human form and the only one I could talk to. Rayhan wants you to break free. She shouted, spinning around as she gutted another wolf. They were never ending. I saw Lola tearing through a few wolves. No, they were right. I could help. I closed my eyes, feeling myself shift, the pain from all the cuts that littered my body healing as flames raged high. I ripped free from the bindings that held me, just as the glowing cage wrapped around the building completely. My focus would be on Elena and Eldridge. I would kill them, and I would free everyone. I'm going after the witches. I shouted, knowing they could hear me even if they couldn't shift. A growl made me look back, and I smiled as Rayhan's irritation was clear. He threw Blake's body against the wall, only for Chris to dig his claws into his chest. Although it felt like they were playing with him. I knew they were going for the kill, but he seemed to be getting up each time. Something was off. Rayhan leapt towards me growling lowly and I nodded. Okay, you're coming with me. I looked upwards. The balcony that surrounded the lower hall was cast in darkness, but I knew they were up there. I ran up the stairs, Rayhan by my side. I whispered a spell, blasting an attacking wolf away as Rayhan PP'd another one to pieces. Feeling the pull inside of me, I knew they had drugged me enough to slow me down, but it didn't matter, I was still strong. I could barely see anything down below. Dust hung in the air and the commotion of wolves and blood was everywhere. I just hoped Rayhana was okay. Rayhan motioned with his head to get on and I climbed onto his back as he rushed up the steps, rounding a corner only for a barrier to stop us from advancing. He growled venomously, my hands tangled into his silky fur. We have been preparing for far too long, daughter of darkness. Eldridge spat. You can still change sides. Choose the winning side. I couldn't see her, her voice was coming from every corner of the hall. I spat coldly. Whispering a spell, I raised my hand, ready to tear their shield away. It blazed brightly before shattering, and I heard a gasp. I smiled coldly. You say I'm the daughter of darkness. So, allow me to show you the darkness within me. For everything you have done. I said icily, sending a blast of fire in every direction. There. I saw the flash of movement, but Rayhan was already on it. I whispered another spell, surrounding him with a protective barrier as I spun around, raising my hand just in time to stop Elena's attack on me. So both were lying in wait. She stepped out of the shadows, looking at me with contempt. I didn't even have anything to say to her, she was someone who I could never forgive. Or someone that you could ever talk reason to. Allow me to send you to Samson. I whispered coldly. Not happening. She hissed, raising her hand and sending a blast of air at me. I pushed it aside, sending ball after ball of fire at her while whispering a spell at the same time, but before I could even cast it, the entire building shook violently, knocking me off my feet. Rayhan! I shouted, seeing the gaping hole in the ground where he and Eldridge had fallen through. I rolled over, clinging to my feet, ignoring the blood that covered my knees. Not so fast. Elena hissed. I blasted her back, whispering a spell that Endora loved. Guess one thing that woman had taught me were spells that could kill. Before Elena's spell could even touch me, several shards of glass from the window behind her were embedded into her body. Her eyes widened in shock before she crumbled to the ground. I walked towards her, plunging my hand into her chest. I was about to rip her heart out, but a sudden tremor threw me back. Dulsanra! Rayhan's voice shouted. I'm okay. I shouted, grabbing onto the stair banister as I climbed to my feet, rushing towards Elena. I blasted her spells away as she struggled to get up. Dulsanra, she warned. May you rot in hell. I whispered, ripping her heart from her chest without even a second thought. Destroying it completely with my fire, I was not going to risk her coming back. I ran to the edge where Rayhan had fallen down, only to see that it was a bloodbath. The enemy wolves were healing incredibly fast and kept on returning with full power. Our side was looking far worse. It's magic, I said, jumping down, ready to land, only for Rayhan to catch me. He smirked when I yelped, not expecting it. Even with blood and dirt on his face, he still looked handsome. It's magic? He asked, kissing me quickly. I could hear his racing heart and kissed softly. Yes, it's an old spell. They've linked them to others, could be anyone or anything, as long as that source lives they live. We find the other sources. No, I can break the link, because it could be innocent humans or even animals. I replied, brushing my hair off my face. I just need a bit of time to perform the spell. What happened to Eldridge? I destroyed her heart. There's no chance that they have the same spell to revive. No, they are witches. If you destroyed the heart, she's gone. I said, Elena is dead too. He nodded. I'll keep everyone away. He said, as 3 wolves ran at us. Any sign of Reginald? I asked, trying to clear my head. No, Rayhan replied, shifting back into a wolf. I looked around. The spell on the building was becoming darker. I could feel the shuddering darkness that was beginning to weigh down upon the air. What was it? I closed my eyes, ready to do the spell to deal with the wolves, when someone stepped up next to me. Tell me the spell. Rayhan's voice came. My eyes flew open and I smiled, seeing the fire in her eyes. You're okay? Yes, she said, with a sad smile. Del, the spell on the building is mutating, isn't it? I'll deal with the wolves, you handle that one. I frowned, looking up only to realize she wasn't wrong. The darkness that was beginning to crawl up the wall like live pulsing tentacles made my heart thud. What was that spell? Okay, I said, turning. I grabbed her hands. Repeating the spell to her. She was a fast learner, and right now I couldn't be more glad. She nodded, repeating the spell. I got it, she said confidently. I nodded, glancing at Rayhan, who was fighting 5 wolves. Papa Raf was bleeding, yet he was dealing with another 3. I did a quick scan. Lola was to the side, bleeding profusely. Chris stood before her as he fought off 2 wolves. My heart pounded. We were tiring out and they were still as energetic as ever. I saw Blake's wolf lunge at Rayhan, but it seemed he too was bound to another life source. We needed to end this spell before things got worse. I ran through the rabid wolves, going to the closest wall towards me. Okay, I had no idea what to do, but I just needed to blast a hole through this thing, right? The darkness in the air was affecting everyone, could see them all moving slower than normal, feeling Rayhan's pain and exhaustion through the bond. Papa Raf was injured, Luna Maria was breathing heavily despite still moving like a skilled assassin. We had lost 7 of the 10 other wolves who had managed to get in before the barrier had gone up. My heart ached thinking of their families. Turning away, I knew I couldn't delay this anymore. I placed my hands on the wall, biting my lip at the agonizing pain that accompanied the poisonous tentacles that began to wrap up my arms. My heart was squeezing painfully as I focused everything I had into the walls. I was stronger than this. I was stronger. I felt my power swirl around me, the blazing fire PPD the tentacles from my arms as the darkness began to shrivel away from the burning flames that spread from my hands. More tentacles wrapped around me, but I didn't stop myself from penetrating the barrier. I got this. I had to. The blood in my mouth was strong and I wondered how many sacrifices they made to gather this power. It was a dark spell, and I knew, like all dark magic, it cost greatly. I can do this. I have to. I ignored the pain that was screaming through my body as I watched the tiny cracks beginning to form. The tentacle-like magic was wrapped around my waist, neck, and arms. Dulsanra! Maria's voice shouted, making my head snap around. Several things happened at once. Maria landed behind me, wrapping her arms around me as she shielded me. My heart thundered in my chest as I looked over her shoulder, my eyes widening as I saw the spell that was coming this way. Reginald stood there, a manic look of triumph on his face, his chest heaving in excitement as he held a seal in his hand. Stored magic and the face of a man with the ultimate ace up his sleeve. I couldn't move, my hands trapped in the tentacles and bound to the wall before me. Luna! My heart pounded, my head squeezing as the dark magic rushed towards us as everything seemed to slow down. A huge wolf landed before us. My eyes met his as I gasped and they twinkled. I didn't need the mind link to know what he was saying. It's going to be okay. His eyes went to Luna Maria just as the powerful spell H.T. I flinched at the impact of the spell, watching it P him to pieces. Blood and pieces of flesh splattered across the room as he was killed on the spot. No. Fear and terror paralyzing me. My head was pounding as reality came rushing down like a painful stab in the stomach and something excruciating pulled in my chest as if my heart had just snapped. Maria's scream of anguish and pain pierced the air. The broken, haunting scream of a woman who had just lost her mate. God, please let this be a nightmare. Rayhan, no. It was like watching a horror movie from behind a screen. I could do nothing. I was stuck fighting off the wolves. Most of our people were down. Only Dad Chris and I remained, and we were all losing. The spell in the air was poisoning us. I heard Rayhana whisper that the spell was done before she collapsed on her knees, coughing up blood. I was finally able to rip Blake to pieces, but just when I thought we had victory. I heard Mom shout. I turned to see Dulsanra working on the spell around us. Monday jumped in front of her, shielding her. My heart was in my mouth as I rushed to shield them both from the attack, but I was too far. I saw Rayhana raise her hands, ready to cast a spell, but she had no time. Everything was too late. Just then, Dad's wolf landed before them, seconds before the spell hit him, obliterating him on the spot. The smell of blood filled the air along with Mom's scream, one I would never forget. I felt the agonizing feeling of something breaking painfully inside, the feeling that every pack member would have felt, the passing of their alpha. Then the surge of power that grew within me, the power gained when one took the alpha title. A power I was now given by default. A power that clarified that my father was gone. No. I couldn't breathe, and I was no longer sure if it was the pain of his loss or due to the darkness that was growing. I looked at Dulsanra. Tears streamed down her face, her red eyes burning with anguish. Bastard! Rayhana cried out, slamming Reginald to the ground, only for Chris to rip his head from his body. She screamed in grief, falling to her knees, and Chris pulled her into his arms. I ran to Mom and Dulsanra, shifting back. I could feel their emotions, as I wrapped my arms around Mom who sobbed uncontrollably. I reached over with one hand cupping my kitten's head, pressing my head against her shoulder from behind. Her heart was pounding and her pain was palpable. My own vision was blurry as she pressed a soft kiss to my forehead before turning back to the wall. I could feel her powers swirling around us, coating those dark tentacles of darkness that had been climbing the building, engulfing them all in fire, and soon I felt the darkness lift. Dulsanra gasped as the spell began to shatter. Spinning around the moment it was complete, her heart thundered as she looked at Mom and the blood on the floor. She was shaking as she began to scoop Dad's blood fruitlessly from the floor. Didn't she realize it was all mixed? I can bring him back. I have dark magic, I just need know, I said hoarsely. I knew what she was about to say. Try to bring him back using necromancy. Dad wouldn't have wanted you to do that. I just need, she whimpered pleadingly, staring at the blood that now coated her hands. No baby, Dad wouldn't want that, I repeated quietly, just as the doors crashed open. But, Dulsanra whispered. I shook my head, our eyes locked. She sobbed, clamping her hands over her mouth. Uncle and several other wolves entered, along with a few witches. His eyes met mine and I knew he knew it was too late. He's right. A life for a life, plus you would have to use some of your own life force, Dulsanra, Rayhana whimpered as she clung to Chris. Raphael would never want that. Mom sobbed, pulling Dulsanra into her arms. I heard Uncle suck in a sharp breath. This was real. Dad was gone. My head was squeezing in pain, I felt excruciatingly tight. Dad. Uncle dropped to his knees next to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry. I should have been here. The pain in his voice was unmasked, but right now I couldn't deal with any of it. Dad was gone. I should have been stronger. Rayhan. Uncle said hoarsely. I clutched my head, fighting back my tears. I gasped when my kitten's trembling arms wrapped around me tightly from behind, just as I roared in agony and rage, clutching my hair tightly. Mama, Rayhana's voice was faint. Mom's sobs. No, this wasn't happening. Let me try. Dulsanra begged quietly. Why didn't she get it? Dad would never be able to live knowing what the repercussions of reviving the dead would have on her. You can't. For him. I whispered, burying my head into her. She didn't reply, simply she sobbed silently. Take the injured. Are dead. And burn the rest. Uncle said quietly. We may have won, but at the cost of someone dear to us all. One of the greatest alphas of all time. The light that always shone, the glue that kept us together. Dad. I hugged Dulsanra tightly, the pain in my chest was overwhelming. But I was alpha, I had to pull myself together. I moved back forcefully, reining in my emotions. Had to, I was alpha. There was not going to be any happy passing of the title down to me. There was not going to be any I'm proud of you, son. My father was gone, and I needed to hold this pack together. 4 days had passed since Dad's death. We had lost 9 in total, including Dad and Beta Jack. Several people had been injured, including Lola, but when she found out her dad had died, she had taken it in her stride and taken her place as my Beta by my side. Those that were injured had been healed by Rehana, Dulsanra, and Kiera, but the ones that died, nothing could replace those. I stood in my office, looking out at the pack training grounds. 2 squads were training, and from here, things looked like they were back to normal. We had buried our dead, signed a treaty with the Coven with clear, ironclad rules. I had taken over the Ahmar Kamar pack under my grandfather's decision. There was no other heir after all. My anger still burned inside me. If Zion hadn't delayed so much, perhaps things could have been different, I could have alerted Dad. I clenched my fists, I needed to decide what to do to that pack. I had my ideas, but let's see. Mum was handling it well, but there were countless nights when Dulsanra would wake me up unintentionally, crying, but she hid it well. If I went to ask if she was okay, she would pretend to be sleeping. She was strong, always hiding her pain. I knew that either Mom or Dulsanra could have been killed that day. And I know Dad died knowing he protected them, his family. But it didn't take the pain away. Rehana wasn't handling it well, blaming herself for not doing better, but Chris was being strong for her and I was so glad she had her mate to be there for her because she needed it. Dulsanra was staying strong, although on the day we looked down at the empty grave, the pain in her voice as she whispered that she had lost her father before even getting to spend much time with him. I knew she was staying strong for us all and doing a good job of it. When I was handling stuff, she would keep Mom company, doing her best as Luna. She was strong, she had been through so much and it showed. Blake the bastard was gone. After some digging, we found out who his dad was, a man who had tried to force 2 underage she-wolves from our pack, and Dad had ended up killing him. He hadn't known Blake's link to him, no one had. Even though he was dead, he didn't suffer as much as he should have. For all he did to Dulsanra. I hoped he rotted in hell and paid for his crimes. If the moon goddess cared, she'd hold him accountable. I still remember the pain that I felt as I tracked Dulsanra and Rehana. The pain Blake had inflicted upon her, that I felt through the bond. Once more she had suffered, the fear I felt wondering if I was too late had engulfed me. When I burst through that entrance, I had been relieved to see the fire of defiance and courage burning in the eyes of my survivor. She truly was strong. A knock on the door brought me out of my thoughts, and I turned as Uncle stepped inside. He and Kiera had been here through it all. Even Liam had come as well as his parents, they had all gone back but uncle and his family remained here. Marcel had come, but he too had left yesterday with Leo, who had been very distant. I had my ideas of why, but I wasn't sure if I was correct. Mind if we could have a word? He asked quietly. Sure. I said, turning away from the window. We hadn't really talked much. He had been helping and he had gone to do damage control with the council as I had killed an alpha, not that I cared, Zion had deserved it. He closed the door and walked in, taking a drag on his cigarette. How are you holding up? He asked. Fine. I said quietly. He walked over to me and looked me in the eye. It's okay to feel. Don't try to give me a hard time, uncle. I said quietly, unable to hold his gaze. He placed his hand on my shoulder. Well, I will, because just like Raphael was there for me, I'm going to be here for you. He said quietly. I wasn't able to ever tell Raphael how I felt about him, but I'm not making that same mistake again. You're my nephew Ray. Don't think you're alone. I know. I said, refusing to let the pain that was crushing me inside take over. I looked at him, tilting my head. How are you holding up? You know how it is. RAF isn't someone that can be replaced in my life. He was the first person to care for me, even when I beat him to an inch of his life, every single time. He'd still smile and greet me the following morning. Yeah, it hurts, he trailed off, frowning deeply as he tilted his head. Yeah. Dad isn't someone anyone can forget. I said quietly. I had seen the effect his death had had on Uncle L. Dad was the last of Uncle's closest friends. He had lost so many loved ones in the span of a few years. My mind flitted to the day of the funeral. Life's too short to hold grudges, Liam, go home. Before life takes those that you love from you. Those were my last words to him. He hadn't disagreed, and the following day he had told me he had decided to return home and take the title of Alpha so his father could take a break. Whatever his reasons were, he was at least returning to his rightful place, because that was what we were, Alphas with a duty to our packs. We would make our fathers proud, dead or alive. We would continue their legacies. Where's your mom? Uncle asked. I looked at him. Mom? Probably home, asked Kiera. Kiera has gone to visit the women who lost their mates with Dulsanra. So Maria's probably home, he nodded to himself before turning. I looked at his back. Why are you asking? I asked. Because it's high time we had a talk. Alejandro, I made my way back to the mansion, a place that still held RAF's scent that was steadily fading. The pain that was eating away at me at his loss was suffocating. I won't lie, I did break down in Kiera's arms. I wished I hadn't wasted the past, pushing him away. I wished I had so many more memories and time with him, but the thing was, no matter how much I wanted it, I didn't. My brother was gone, the angel who kept my sanity from spiraling completely. The silence in the mansion was deafening. Flashes of memories came to the forefront of my mind. Everything he said to me in these very halls, his promises that he kept, but I didn't believe. His love, that I denied, his worry, that angered me. I sucked my breath in, exhaling sharply. Focus, Al, focus. Today I was going to complete the one silent wish that he never uttered, for me and Maria to make amends. We never saw eye to eye. She didn't like me, and she was afraid. I never thought much of it, but something that I said earlier in RAF's office was niggling at my mind. I never asked the reason. Why did she hate me? I just never cared. We formally greeted each other when we saw each other, and she was good with my kids and Kiera, so I didn't really give a care. But now, I want the reason. Because I wanted to fix it for Raphael. I looked around the lounge and downstairs but she wasn't there. I made my way upstairs. Silence. She was always so silent, a trait that Rayhan had inherited from her. He was the best tracker because of her abilities. He could hide himself well just like she could. I noticed that when I was younger, she would enter, and you wouldn't actually realize. I had to strain my ears, but wherever she was silent. I went to their bedroom. RAF's bedroom. This was painful. I knocked lightly. No answer. I frowned. Was she not here? I opened the door just as the door to the en-suite opened. Maria stepped out in lingerie, a towel in her hand as she dried her long hair. She gasped, her eyes flying open, covering herself with the tiny towel, turning her back to me. Sorry. I looked away, freezing, and turned back sharply, my eyes going to her back, catching a glimpse of it before she disappeared back into the bathroom, slamming the door. Claw marks. She had 4 huge scars across her back. When had she ever gotten hurt? I scrubbed a hand down my face. This was awkward. I'll wait outside until you're done. I said, sounding colder than I meant to. I shut the door loudly. Just great. Nice. 5 minutes later, she opened the door, her face in its usual stoic mask. Thankfully, she was fully dressed. I think even RAF might come back to kill me if he found out I saw his mate. Why do women have to have such skimpy lingerie? Actually, I'm not complaining. I like Kiera in them. Okay, I'm going off topic. I sighed and she crossed her arms. I looked at her, thinking she always had her back covered and dressed pretty modestly for the most part. No wonder I never saw her back before. Can I help you? She asked, emotionlessly. I looked into her grey eyes. Despite how well she was masking her emotions, the pain in them was obvious. I strolled into the room and walked over to the huge doors that led to the balcony and looked out onto the garden. How are you holding up? I asked. Well, thank you. She said. Lie. Oh yeah? Then you're the first hold up well after losing a mate. I remarked coldly. She stayed silent and I clenched my jaw. I hated how she was always so antagonizing. I glared at the garden, thinking she was always silent. Every time me and RAF argued, she'd stay silent. Why are you always so silent? I asked quietly, now turning to her. I felt angry all of a sudden. Did not she care for her mate? She looked at me, her eyes flashing with hurt, but it was gone as fast as it came. If you are done, you can go. She said coldly. I am not done. I want answers, Maria, and don't give me that usual blank. Why didn't you ever get angry? If it was Kiara in your place, she'd never let anyone treat her mate like that, didn't you love? Don't ever say I loved my mate any less than yours loves you. She shouted. Good. She fell for it. Well, doesn't seem like you cared. Her eyes were filled with pain, and she clenched her fists in anger, her eyes flashing a dazzling blue. I stayed silent for him. I hated everything you did to him. You would beat him to an inch of his life, and I wished you would leave. I didn't want you near him. But I stayed silent to not cause him any more pain. She shouted, her voice breaking as she continued. I stayed silent, so I didn't cause him more pain. The pain you caused him was far more than he deserved. Every time you hurt him, I felt it. I felt his pain, but for him and for his love for you, I took it. That was the answer. The answer to her behavior towards me. It wasn't her arrogance. It was her sacrifice for her mate. For RAF's sake, she tolerated me, she tolerated me. The realization that I had put her through hell and back and still treated her like she didn't matter. I ran my hand through my hair, as I stared into her now grey eyes. Her eyes glittered with tears, and a fleeting memory of a rainy night flashed through my mind. RAF falling to the ground. Maria's scream. My heart thundered, closing the gap between us. I grabbed her upper arms, not missing the way she tensed at my touch. Maria! Those scars on your back. How did you get them? I asked quietly. Please tell me I'm wrong. The fear that was consuming me was that I may have hurt my own brother's mate. Please, goddess, no. She refused to look at me or speak. Her lips pressed together, quivered slightly, but she remained stubborn. Maria, please. I practically begged. Silence. Please. Maria, I pleaded. I went down on my knees to get a better look at her eyes, which were refusing to look up at me. The tears she had refused to shed were spilling down her cheeks, making my own heart clench. Please don't ask. Why? If you loved Raphael, then you won't ask me. She said quietly. I narrowed my eyes, and if you loved your mate, you will tell me. I growled. We were worlds apart, two people who had nothing in common, nor saw eye to eye. But we had one very important thing in common. The love for RAF. I don't need to prove my love for my mate. She shot back, her eyes flashing with defiance. I realized as I stared up to eyes that were so similar to Rayhan's, that I was wrong about Maria. She wasn't just a haughty, arrogant princess, but a strong queen who stood by her mate in the hardest way. I smirked, taking her hands that she had balled into fists, forcing them open as I held them. I got my answer. There would only be one reason she was refusing to tell me, to uphold RAF's wish, knowing that I'd feel like this. If I knew. He probably didn't tell me back then, knowing I'd run away. And I would have. There were blanks in my memory, most of the time I would lose control and go on a rampage. I had hurt her, but for my sake, both she and RAF stayed quiet. Then answer one question. Did I do that to you? I asked, letting my alpha command roll into my voice, my eyes flashing red as I awaited her answer. Answer me. She pressed her lips together, but she wasn't strong enough to fight the command of the Lycan King. Yes, she whispered, her lips trembling as she fought against my command. My chest tightened as I realized that no saint could ever love someone after they hurt their mate, but RAF. You didn't come after me though, you were attacking Raphael but he wasn't able to stop you that time. Was she trying to defend my actions? You were going for the final attack, but he wouldn't have survived. So I ran to protect your mate. I finished, now looking at the ground. My heart thundered. RAF. Why? Was I worth that much to you? Memories of long ago flashed through my head, the way she hadn't allowed the kids to come stay at my pack. The way she always stayed away from me. We both know your mate hates me. But yet, it's good, I am a monster. Her attitude pisses me off. It's not like that, Al. She isn't like that. I had said hurtful stuff about her and he never once got angry. I must have hurt him so much with my words but he took it. I looked up at her, seeing her in an entire new light. Why didn't you heal? I asked hoarsely. I was pregnant with Rayhana. There was something wrong with me, I was ill throughout her pregnancy, we now presume it was due to her being a witch. I couldn't heal well back then. She replied quietly. Another slap to the face. I could have killed Ri. For her to risk her child meant I would have definitely killed Raf that night. I stood up slowly, letting go of her hands. I'm sorry Maria, I am. I whispered. She looked up at me, confused, and for a moment I saw Rayhana. They had a lot of similarities and I wondered how come I had never seen them before. I cupped her face, surprising the both of us. But hey, if I can love my niece, then I can love her mother. I am sorry, Maria. I wish I had done this sooner. But can we start afresh? I know I can't make up for all I put you through, but I will be here for you just the way RAF was there for me. I promise. For you, the kids, just give me one more chance. I asked quietly. I brushed her tears away with my thumbs, and she slowly gripped my wrists, seeming to hesitate. Just one more chance. I promise this time I won't care. For RAF? I asked. Fresh tears fell down her face before she nodded hesitantly, and I felt some relief. I smirked. She only agreed because of those last two words. She still wins. I said softly. She gave a weak, small smile, and I let go of her face, wrapping my arms around her tightly. I promise I will take care of her, I will be the best brother to her, the way I should have been to you RAF, forgive me. Dulsanra 3 weeks had passed since Papa RAF left us for a better place. The pain of his loss was felt across the entire country. Alphas from all around came to pay their respects. I also realized Rayhan had made a reputation for himself as a dangerous alpha, one who would defy every law of the council if need be. I knew the king, or as he told me to call him Al, or whatever I wanted to, so I settled for King Burrito. He had a lot to deal with, but he had been here for us all. That day he was talking to Mama Mari, Kiera, and I had heard the end of it, but we had walked away, leaving them to their moment. They had needed it and both of us had been so happy that it had taken place. Life had changed for us all. Papa RAF was someone who would never be forgotten. Although we had overcome all our troubles, never had we imagined that we'd lose a king in the process. I wanted to blame myself for Papa Raf, but I know it's not what anyone would want, and rather than wallow in self-pity, I wanted to be the pillar of strength for my family. My greatest abuser was dead, and although I wasn't the one to kill him, it did not matter. He was gone. The remaining handful of hunters belonging to the group were tracked and killed. They had been from many packs all across the country, much to the king's anger. Rayhan and I had become Alpha and Luna by default, but Mama Mari had said she wanted me to continue with my studies as Papa Raf and Rayhan had wanted. I realized then that Rayhan had refused the Alpha title, so I wasn't burdened with the job as Luna so soon. It warmed me that even now, everyone wanted me to continue to study. But although I persisted that it wasn't important, Mama Mari had taken my hand and told me it would serve as a distraction for her too. The Ahmar Kamar pack was renamed the Dark Storm pack and Rayhan appointed Chris as Alpha for it. Although this meant Rayhana had to move a half-hour away, we still would be going to university together once I had caught up with the rest of my studies. She didn't complain, being the woman she needed for her mate and now Alpha. To make it clear that Chris was capable of the title, he had to fight the Beta and Delta of that pack. He had won the 2-against-1 match and the pack had no reason not to yield to their new Alpha and Luna. Not to mention Rayhana had the blood of the Ali family running through her. Alpha Amir was there to guide them as well, and although he had been pained at his grandson's loss, he knew Rayhan's reasons. Even then I knew it was going to take him time to be okay with it. Zion's mother had left the pack, returning to the pack she had come from, and as for Zion's mate, she had committed suicide the day after his death. Yes, Zion was in the wrong, but it saddened me that an innocent person had suffered. The truth is that no matter how much a person does something for the right reason, innocent people still suffer. More hate is bred, and I fear that the next generation will be the ones to suffer most because of it. Rayhan had become an alpha that his father would be proud of. He sorted everything out, appointing a new Delta to replace Chris, and got to work instantly, taking over his father's place with ease. I was proud of him too. Night had now fallen, Chris and Rayhana had come for the evening. Rayhan had been working late in the home office. I walked through the halls wanting to tell him to leave his work and join us. I knocked on the door lightly. "You don't need to knock, kitten," Rayhan's voice said, and I opened the door. There he sat in his jeans and white tee. Even though he was dressed so casually, he was fine. His hair was up in a messy man bun as he looked down at some files on his desk, before looking up at me. Our eyes met, my heart racing as I made my way over to him. His eyes schemed over me, even in only a fitted black top and blue torn jeans, he found me beautiful. He moved his chair back, gripping my waist. The sparks that coursed through us, binding us beyond anything words could explain, were strong. I touched my forehead to his, wrapping my arms around his broad, muscular shoulders. "Come join us for a hot drink," I whispered. "There's a lot to do." I placed my finger to his lips and smiled gently. "No one would want you to bury yourself in work, Rayhan. Come. Rayhana and Chris have come too." He sighed and nodded, wrapping his arms around me tightly, sending tingles to my core when he kissed my neck softly. "You're right. Let's go," he said. His gaze flickered to my lips and I smiled. We both leaned in, our lips meeting in a deep, passionate kiss that gave birth to an eruption of butterflies inside of me. He kissed me slowly yet passionately, one hand twisting into my hair as his lips began to dominate me. A soft whimper left my lips and he took the chance to slip his tongue into my mouth. I gasped, my core throbbing as he explored every inch. His free hand that was not tangled in my hair slipped under my top. My breath hitched. Rayhan. We need to go downstairs, I whimpered. Yet? Then we will continue this tonight. He said huskily. My cheeks flushed and I nodded, standing up. The scent of my arousal hung in the air, and I blushed deeper when he tapped me. I want you bent over like a good little kitty tonight. He murmured. I poked my eyes out at him. I always am your good little girl. I whispered as we walked down the hall. He slipped his hand around my waist, pulling me against him as he kissed me hard. You are. He growled. We parted breathlessly and continued walking. I looked around the luxurious halls. Every corner of this house held memories of Papa Raf and not one was bad. He was the light that still shone upon us, despite his absence. We went down the stairs, and into the lounge where everyone was sitting around, a game of Monopoly already set up. Mama Mary had told us how much Papa Raf enjoyed his board games, so we'll keep that Friday night tradition going by gathering here, playing games and talking about all the good times to come and those that have passed. Chris sat with his arm around Rayhana. Mama Mari sat on the empty sofa. Despite the graceful smile on her lips, she had lost weight, but she was remaining strong for her children. You guys took forever, got busy? Chris asked with a smirk, kissing Rayhana's neck. Sadly no. Rayhan said. He leant over, placing a hand behind his mother's head and kissing her forehead. She gave him a warm smile that caused my eyes to sting with tears that I hid quickly. A mother's love held no bounds, and hers was no less. Hot drinks are here, and I'm guessing they are not even hot anymore. Rayhana complained with a pout. You guys took forever. A spell will fix that, I said, smiling across at her. She smirked. Oh yeah, or a touch of magic. She leant over, brushing her fingers along the mugs, and the steam that came up from them told me the job was done. You girls, Mama Mari said, shaking her head. It's very convenient, Mama Mari, I said without thinking. Her heart skipped a beat. That was something that I had started calling her in my head over the last week or so but not said aloud. Sorry she placed a hand on my knee. Don't be, I love it. Our eyes met and we smiled, before we turned to the game. All right, I'm the ship, Rayhan said. Hey, why? Rayhana complained. I'm the hat, Chris added. Thimble, I said grabbing it. Mama Mari chuckled. I'm sure a piece won't make a difference, the ship holds luck. Watch, Ray will win. Rayhana complained. I will, but only because I have my lucky charm here. Rayhan replied, looking up at me. Check them out, ma chérie. Chris snickered, kissing her lips. I smiled at the man that had given me true happiness, the man who had become my all, the man that my life was tied to. I was in a dark place until he found me and showed me that I could hope for so much more. He was my life, my world, my destined alpha. I love you, kitten. He whispered, kissing me softly. I love you more. He smirked, knowing that was one we could argue on forever. Your turn, Del. Rayhana brought me out of my reverie, and I turned, grabbing the dice. Yes, this was my life, one I would cherish forever, and live it to the fullest until the day I die. 3 years later. Dulsanra, the bell rang, signaling the end of my final lecture. This was it, I was done for the year. 1 more year left and I'd have my degree. I rushed through the hall, a guy from one of my lectures jumped aside to not knock into me, resulting in his books going flying. Watch it snow! He shouted. See next year, Lewis! I shouted back. See ya! He grumbled. Rushing through the open doors that led to the front of the building, I skidded to a stop, smiling as the sun hit my face. My waist-length hair blew around me, and I closed my eyes for a moment, relishing it and the scent of my mate. I opened my eyes, he was always here, ready to take me home. Causing trouble in the halls again, babe? Rayhana asked. I smiled at her. She looked as good as ever, I could see her tiny baby. She was already 2 months along and had another 4 to go, but the pup was growing well. Not at all, just excited that we are done for the year. I said, taking her books from her. I can carry books, Del. I never said you couldn't. I replied as we fell into step. My heart soared when I saw Rayhan standing there against his Range Rover, Chris by his side, both of them had their eyes on us. Not a day passed when our love didn't grow. My stomach still nodded like it was the first time he was looking at me. Even now in my gingham white dress, he looked at me like I was a goddess walking the earth. My heart still pounded with nerves like a girl meeting her crush for the first time. And these sparks. The moment his hand wrapped around my waist as he lifted me and kissed me hard. Goddess, these sparks. They were as strong as the first time we sealed our bond. How was my kitten's day? He asked. I looked into his ruggedly handsome face. He was 24 going on 25 now, and age had only made him even more gorgeous, if that was possible. Better now that I saw my yum-yum. I replied, kissing his neck softly. Yes, that nickname stuck. He smirked. Well, I'll make it even better tonight. He winked at me, sending a jolt of pleasure to my core. Okay, are you two going to get in the car or put on a show for the student body? Chris remarked. Get in the car, handsome. Rayhana said to him, kissing his lips. I'm not really into the whole exhibitionist kink. Rayhan replied, giving me a wink. No, he wasn't. But he enjoyed me putting on a show for him in the bedroom. And didn't mind giving me one either. I ran my hand down his chest, before yanking him down and kissing his lips. Chris did the car's horn and I groaned. Rayhan! Tell the annoying banana off. I told you I'm not a banana. You act like one. I complained, getting into the front. Rayhan strapped me in before getting in the driver's seat. Don't tease her, Chris. So, when am I getting a nephew or niece? Rayhana asked. Del, you said we could be pregnant buddies. That was before you got pregnant earlier than we planned. I replied. Why would you two plan this without us? Chris asked, his arms around Rayhana. Rayhan chuckled. I actually knew of their plan to be pregnant together. He added. Well, now I feel like I was left out. Oh, come on, handsome. How could you be left out when I can't make babies without you? Rayhana said before climbing into him. Rayhan groaned, and I giggled. Horny and pregnant. Not in my car, guys. Rayhan growled, only for them to ignore us. I smiled as he held his hand out to me and I laced my fingers with his, resting my head on his shoulder as we drove towards home. Rayhan turned the volume on high, and I had a feeling it was so he didn't have to hear even a moan from the couple making out on the back seat. I looked out as we drove back home, a place that I couldn't even imagine life without. Every day Papa RAF was remembered, but although we are never able to overcome that loss, we learned to live with it. Life was good, and although Rayhan refused to allow us to go to training at the Coven, we had a few witches come to the pack to give us training. It was usually Janina or Olivia. The Coven had punished several witches, and many had their powers sealed away once the dirt in their past was brought up. It had taken time, but things had worked. I didn't see Ames much, but that was okay. We had taken different paths in life. He had moved to the States now. We would send each other a message on our birthdays, but that was it, and it was enough. I had killed his parents and his sister, and although they deserved it, he still struggled with that. Tonight was a special night for us. I was officially stepping into the position of Luna. I could never thank Mama Mari enough for letting me live for years stress-free, and although I learned my Luna duties, she wanted to see me succeed in what I wanted, and Rayhan did too. My man who put me first every single time. I had studied hard, and next year when I received my degree, I was going to focus on helping our kind. My people, many suffered from trauma but not many talked about it, and there were things you couldn't just talk to normal therapists about. Not only children, but adults too. I looked at Rayhan, his ear glinted with a crystal stud. I smiled, thinking he was so strong, so perfect, so loving, yet the world had begun to fear him. The merciless Alpha, that was what I had heard some call him. But even then, he didn't care, running the pack with a just and fair rule. We arrived home, but before I even got through the front door, Kiara took my arm, dragging me upstairs and away from Rayhan. Kia, I said, food first. You can eat later. She protested with a pout. I'll bring you food. 6-year-old Dante said with a wink. Hey, back off. Rayhan warned him. Sure, Ray. He taunted before walking off. What do you teach him? I heard Rayhan ask King Burrito. How to be a gentleman. Not. The king replied mockingly. I shook my head, as Kia dragged me to Maria's room. It seemed like this was where I was getting ready. Girls! She exclaimed as Catalia and Skyla ran past, almost knocking into us. Sorry, Mama. Skyla said in a sing-song voice. Sorry, Mama. Catalia repeated, before both giggled, clearly not sorry. I smiled as Kia pushed me into the room, just as I heard Rayhana tell the girls to be careful. Sky, Kat, careful. Your sister is carrying a pup. I heard King Burrito growl. I didn't see a pup, Papa. Skyla replied innocently. In her belly. She ate a pup. Kaudalia gasped dramatically. I heard the king groan and Rayhan chuckle as Rayhana tried to explain. I smiled as Kiera laughed. They will make him go white soon. I'm sure he'll still look handsome. I said amused, as Rayhana now entered, turning some music on. Okay, makeup. She said. I'll get to your hair. Kiera said, the sound of fireworks going off made us shake our heads. The men are already going crazy. Guaranteed that was Chris. Rayhana said. Without a doubt. I replied, and we all started laughing. Look what I got you, Dulsanra. I looked up only to see Dante standing there with a plate of pastries, a little smirk on his face showing how proud he was of himself. Oh, my gorgeous little Cho. Thank you. I said, my eyes sparkling as I reached for it. Rayhan won't be happy, kiddo. Rayhana added as she began opening a few eyeshadow palettes. Dulsanra said she was hungry. Dante said, passing me the plate before giving me a small smirk. He really was a cutie, and although he really did seem to have a bit of an infatuation with me, I was sure half the time he just liked to irritate Rayhan, knowing he'd get a reaction. Oh, your dress is divine. Kiera murmured as I bit into a cinnamon roll. Thanks, it turned out better than I thought it would. I said, smiling when Dante gave me a small kiss and left the room after getting a shake of the head from his mother. Of course it did, babe, we can't have anything less than the best. Rayhana said, reaching over and taking an iced bun from the plate. How's the pregnancy going? Kiera asked him. It's good. I just want X like all the time. Rayhana said, making both of us smirk. Oh? I'm sure Chris has no issue with that. I teased. Obviously not. Rayhana blushed, lightly biting her lips. Being Luna doesn't get easier though, does it? Kiera smiled knowingly as she got to work on my hair. There's always an expectation and a demand, but when you are born to be a Luna, there is no way you would do any wrong. You got this, hun. True. Baba Amir was happy to know I was pregnant, and he said he was coming back from his world tour earlier to spend time with his great-grand pup. But the expectation of having a boy is high. Rayhana murmured. I frowned, sensing her worry. It wasn't often Rayhana was like that. I reached over and took her hand. Don't ever feel like you need to do more. Girl or boy, this child will be perfect. I said firmly. She smiled confidently. Goddess, you're just like Chris, he said the same. And he isn't wrong, besides I'm sure if it's a girl, he wouldn't mind making another few. Kiera teased. I giggled at that. Oh, I'm sure he wouldn't, Rayhana said, rolling her eyes. I'd like to see him pregnant though. It isn't easy. And what about you and your yum-yum? Kiera asked me. I smiled as I stared in the mirror. About that. We will when the time is right. I replied, blushing lightly. No pressure. Kiera replied. But how much do you want? Any number. I haven't really thought that far ahead, I replied with a small pout. We all know Uncle loved you pregnant. I bet he wants to impregnate you again. Rayhana teased, making Kiara blush before we all started laughing. I smiled. I truly had made some really good friends. I had a family that was irreplaceable. It was much later, and everyone had finally finished getting dressed. Music was blasting through the house, the sound of shouting and excitement filled the air, strong smells of expensive fragrances and delicious foods mingled pleasantly. "My prince, please make sure they don't dirty their dresses." Kiara's voice flitted in through the window. Mama Mari entered the bedroom with a soft, graceful smile on her face. I stood up and she came over to me, gently cupping my face. "You look beautiful. I am so proud to have been gifted a daughter like you," she said. "Thank you, Mama Mari," I said softly, hugging her tightly. She hugged me back, and although I lost one mother and Papa Raf, I still had her. She stepped away. "Well, I'll send Rayhan up." She left the room and I turned away, gazing into the mirror. Everyone was already outside. Rayhan and I would be going together. I missed him. I hadn't seen him all afternoon. I waited in the room patiently for my king. I looked in the mirror in our bedroom, at my reflection. The fact that I was actually becoming Luna officially, ready to take my place by Rayhan's side, seemed surreal. I took a deep breath just as his scent hit my nose and I felt his intense gaze upon me. "Rayhan, I had been itching to see my kitten all afternoon, but Mom, Ri, and Kia refused to let me. The documents and passports are here, and your stuff is all packed," Rose said to me, holding out an envelope. She was dressed in a green evening gown. "Thanks," I said to her. She gave me a smile before lifting their 2-year-old son, Shane, that they had via surrogacy. "Hey kiddo," I said, ruffling his blonde locks. He looked a lot like his mummy. Lola came over, wrapping her arms around her mate and kissing her lips. "Rayhan, go get Dulsanra, and then both of you make your way outside," Mom said. She was dressed in a dusky blue gown with sequins all over it, with a slit and ruffled sleeves. I was glad as the years went by she returned more to her usual self. Although I know losing Dad was hardest on her and still affected her. "Looking good, Mom." She gave me a smile. "Thank you, Yahayatai," she said softly, cupping my cheek for a moment. I looked towards the stairs, before making my way up them, only to see him making his way upstairs already. "Oi!" I said. Dante turned, moving a brow. "What?" he shot back. "Where are you going?" I asked. This kid had an infatuation with Dulsanra, and it was annoying. No matter how much I loved him, he was like her shadow when he was around, and that was pretty often. Our families always spent time together. He was dressed in a shirt and black pants, his curls tumbling over his forehead and his piercing red eyes staring into mine. One thing was sure, he was a Rossi through and through, and his arrogance showed it. "To Dulsanra," he stated as if it was obvious, which it was. "That's my mate, kid. Dad said people can have 2 mates." I froze, staring down at him. Did he just say that? My eyes flashed green, and he simply looked at me like I was a cockroach on the wall. "Yeah, rarely, and I assure you, a 22-year-old woman is not going to be mated to a 6-year-old pup." He smirked. there's 16 years difference between mama and dad. 22 take away 6s. With those words, he turned to carry on up the stairs, but I lifted him up and headed back down them. Let me down, Rayhan. Uncle. I growled, following my nose until I found Uncle standing in the corner, holding a cigarette. Clearly hiding away from his daughters. He raised an eyebrow, before smirking as he looked at Dante, who I had under my arm. This I struggled to find a word to suit him. Uncle added helpfully. I smirked, as Dante rolled his eyes. Yeah, that. I couldn't bring myself to call the kid that. I loved him, but he grated on my every nerve. Had some messed up mentality that Dulsanra may be his mate. Uncle smirked. Seriously, Ray, scared of competition with a 6-year-old? A 6-year-old who acts 20? I shot back. So, I'm old enough for Dulsanra. Dante added, smirking. I glared at Uncle, who frowned at his son. Do not give Rayhan. He growled. I dropped him and turned to walk off when his little irritating voice came after me. L like Dulsanra. You really need to rein it in, Dante. Uncle was saying. I sighed. It was definitely his infatuation with her other appearance, and her being sweet and caring towards him didn't help. I walked up the stairs quietly, making my way to my room. I stopped in the open doorway, watching her standing there, smoothing her dress out. She looked ethereal. In a metallic gold dress that hugged her curves perfectly, it wrapped around her, the gold fabric only covering one side. I throbbed as she turned towards me, and I saw the sheer net fabric sprinkled with gems that covered her arms. And I won't lie that I stared at her, trying to see her. Only to realize she had some sort of sticker over it. She laughed, and I swallowed hard. Got distracted somewhere? She teased, doing a slow twirl. I dragged my eyes up, taking in the neckline to her gown, which looked like a necklace, and then looking at her gorgeous face. With her shimmery eyes, deep red lips, and her hair styled in an elegant updo, she looked gorgeous. I can't really blame Dante. You are the embodiment of the goddess of beauty herself, I said, snapping the door shut. Her eyes widened, her gaze going to the open window. Rayhan. Dulsanra. I imitated her breathless tone, closing the gap between us. With the years that had passed, she had become even stronger, more confident. Her moments of fear and triggering moments became far and few. She had kept us together when we lost Dad. There were days that Mom had it hard, and she would push her way into Mom's room and wrap her in her arms whilst spending the night with her. She never boasted about what she did, but she had been a true Luna, the pillar of this pack. My hands went to her, and I looked into her eyes. I'm so proud of the woman you have become, kitten. Goddess, I was always proud of you, but you have accomplished so much in the last few years. I whispered, my nose brushing hers. All because of you. She whispered. That wasn't true, but it was one of the things we would argue over. You look incredible, by the way. She added, looking me over. Her scent invaded my senses, her warm fresh breath making me want to do so much to her. I kissed her slowly yet deeply, relishing in the sparks that coursed through us. She was the most precious thing to me. We broke apart when she gasped for breath, and I smirked. I got a gift for you. I said, moving away from her. I went to my wardrobe, reaching to the back where I had kept the small box. I took out the envelope with our travel documents and passed them to her. She looked curious, taking a seat on the bed and opening the envelope. Her eyes widened. Venice. Yeah, think we both deserve a holiday, I said, winking at her, as I crouched down before her. Venice, then Paris, and then Dubai. 6 weeks, baby girl, I said softly, as she looked through the envelope. Her heart pounded and I could sense her excitement, although we had gone on a few holidays, nowhere for that long. That's... Thank you, she said, flinging her arms around me and knocking me onto my back onto the floor. Her lips met mine in a passionate kiss. I chuckled against her lips. When do we leave? She asked. Tonight, I replied. I need to pack. All done, I said, making her freeze. She smiled and got off of me, but the excitement never left her. She opened the box and I smirked watching her take out the satin blindfold, yet I guess over the years we tried out a few kinks. This. She trailed off, taking out the diamond plug and cuffs. Just a few toys to keep us occupied on our private jet, I whispered with a wink, making her eyes flash red. The desire in her eyes matched mine, and I knew we were going to have fun. Sounds like a plan, she whispered. I smirked, taking the box and envelope from her, and slipping it into my duffel bag. There's something I wanted to give you too. She hesitated. I turned back to her, trying to ignore the sweet, tempting scent of her arousal. Oh yeah? I asked, pulling her into my arms. Well, it's not here. I mean, it's not a physical thing. Well, not yet anyway. I moved a brow, not expecting her to be so flustered. Use your words, kitten. I teased, just how you do in bed, like the little good girl you are. She blushed, smacking my chest lightly. Well, I was thinking. I know you've never brought this up, but I want to have a mini yum. It took me a moment to realize what she had just said. My heart thundered as I stared down at her. You want a pup? I asked, stunned. Don't you? She asked softly, looking into my eyes intently. Well. I looked away. I was 24, set as alpha. I did want kids one day, but that was if she was ready. For me, you never mentioned it, saying there was no rush, but I think it's high time we had one. I looked into her startling blue eyes, cupping her face. That would be an amazing gift, I whispered. She smiled. And I think we'll have plenty of time on this holiday to make one little perfect yum. She whispered. Oh, we would. What about your last year in uni? I will manage, and I know I will have support. Don't worry, she said, her hand on my chest. I smiled, taking her hand, kissing it gently and nodded. Yeah, she would have support because I'd always be there for her, we all would. Shall we? My eyes widened, before she burst out laughing. Go downstairs, Rayhan, she said. I gave her a look, she made me go blank. Yes, sadly, I remarked. She glared jokingly at me before I slipped my hand around her waist and led her downstairs. The party was in full swing. Dulsanra had said a few words as Luna and we had toasted her before eating and drinking. The dance floor was full. Skyla and Catalia were dancing together. Dante was on his tablet at a table. Rose and Lola were dancing, their little one fast asleep and being taken care of by one of the Omegas. Rayhana and Chris were sitting in the corner making out. Me and Del were sitting around with Mom, Marcel, Kiera, and Uncle AI. I love how all of your dresses coordinated so nicely. Dulsanra was saying, looking at Mom and Kiera. I know, I think the pictures came out amazing. Kiera added, holding out her phone. Kiera was in a pink gown. Now that I think of it, there was a pattern going on between Mum, Kiera and Rayhana, only my kitten was different. But then again, she would stand out, even in a sack. He's changed. Uncle Al said quietly staring at Let. We all glanced at him. He was nearly 16 but looked 20 already. He was well built, tattoos littered his body. His hair was shaved from the sides and back, the rest put up in a hair tie. Unlike the rest of us men in suits, he was in black pants, a black top and a leather jacket, smoking a cigarette. He doesn't listen. I just about managed to get him to come. Marcel said quietly. Mom looked sympathetic. She had offered Leo to come to stay with us for a while, but he had flatly refused. Yeah, I'm seeing myself and I don't like it. Uncle Al muttered, smoking his own cigarette. Leo looked towards us. I knew he'd probably heard us. His eyes were filled with hatred as he stared at me. I knew it was me that he resented. He'd gone to Uncle Al's pack, but this was the first time in years that he had come here. He looked away, and Dulsanra placed a hand on my leg. I looked down at her. Ever since I had gone to the Sangui pack, Leo had never been the same with me. I knew he hated me for what I had done that night, but even when I tried to explain it 2 Christmas ago, he told me to go away. But regardless of the fact, like Dad would have wanted, I'll keep trying with him. You look fine, amor mio. Thanks baby. Kiera whispered back, kissing him. Uncle Al tilted his head, looking at Mom. You keeping the girls tonight, Mari? Yes. Mom replied with a smile. Uncle smirked. Love you. He said. She smiled back, and I smiled, loving the bond they had built. You really ask for too much. Kiera scolded him. I don't. I love the company. Mom added. A moment of sadness washed over us. Dulsanra and Kiera took Mom's hands, smiling gently at her. Uncle timed to Dulsanra, once again, congratulations Spitfire on the position, but if you ever get bored of Rayhan, I'm sure Dante would love to have you as his queen. He snickered. Everyone burst out laughing as I glared at Uncle. No thanks, I'll keep her entertained. I said, standing up. Let's dance, kitten. Only if you sing for me. She whispered. As you wish. I pulled her into my arms, mind linking the DJ to change the music. I took her hand, wrapping my other around her waist as we began to dance and I began to sing. Pouring my emotions and love into that song. Others joined us on the dance floor, and even when the first drops of rain began falling, no one cared, enjoying the highs of this night. Dulsanra locked her arms around my neck loosely, and I pulled her against me, grinding against her. Under the night sky, I claimed her lips in a sizzling kiss. Our journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. No matter how hard life gets, or how dark, things will always get better. We broke apart, turning our gaze up as the first stream of fireworks erupted in the sky, illuminating Dulsanra's face as she gazed at the sky, a beautiful smile on her face. To Alpha Rayhan and Luna Dulsanra! Chris shouted as another stream of fireworks went off. Congratulations, Luna! I whispered, wrapping my arms around her once more, our lips meeting in a sizzling kiss, setting off our own fireworks that erupted within us. The end. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.